On today's episode, we're diving into a topic that affects millions of people worldwide: learning disabilities. Often misunderstood and stigmatized, learning disabilities can significantly impact a person's ability to learn and process information. For many homeschool moms, navigating the complexities of learning disabilities can be a unique and challenging journey. Also, unfortunately, many homeschool moms are reticent about getting their child evaluated. There is a stigma. Moms are afraid that if they admit there are learning challenges, others might think they are letting their kids down. Today, I will encourage you to put that reticence behind you, open up to those around you, and get the help your child needs. Hey, homeschool mom, I'm Erica Sagert on the Intentional Homeschooler podcast with more actionable steps and encouragement for your homeschooling journey so you can confidently and intentionally homeschool your children without sacrificing your sanity. Grab a pen and paper, your favorite cup of brew, and let's get started. Before I dive into the subject of learning disabilities, I have a bit of a disclaimer. First of all, in a 15-minute episode, there's no way that I can cover as much information as I need to, but I will dive into this topic more in future episodes. Also, I don't currently have specialized training in the field of learning disabilities, although I have personal experience and I have general educational training, so I do have solid information to share with you. I have a heart for it, and I'm learning along the way. The most important piece of advice that I want to start with is do not ignore challenges that your children are facing. If my parents and teachers would have ignored the challenges I had as a student, or simply hoped that eventually I would get better, I wouldn't be where I am today. When I was a student, I struggled with school, and it got to be a pretty serious struggle by the time I was in the 5th grade. This is typically when there are more tests and more reading and more comprehension needed, and I continued to struggle. And my teachers at the time just thought I simply got nervous for the test. I was a great student otherwise, but this continued on until my 9th grade year when I switched schools. The principal at the new school suggested that I be tested for learning disabilities. Sure enough, I had a learning disability that seriously affected my reading comprehension and memory. Soon after being tested, I began some work with a tutor one-on-one, and in the course of about a year of this specialized tutoring, my grades improved from C's and D's to B's and A's. My confidence also grew as well. If my parents wouldn't have gotten the help that I needed, I probably wouldn't have been able to complete college. I am so thankful that my parents reached out when they did. All right, there is an elephant in the room that we homeschoolers need to discuss. In my personal experience, and in many homeschoolers that I have been around, there are many learning disabilities that go undiagnosed. I believe it's largely based out of fear. The fear of what people will think of me, a fear of what the professionals will prescribe, a fear of being different, a fear of being told that I can't homeschool, or a fear of our kids being singled out. One of my kids struggled a lot with reading, and I'm just going to be straight with you. I put it off. I honestly did not want to have to reach out, and that's coming from me, a professional educator. But as a homeschool mom, I found it very difficult to admit that I needed help with one of my children. So I'm talking to you out of experience. I'm talking to you out of a person who had that fear. And eventually I did get some help with some brain training and some other things with some Barton reading program. But I'm just telling you that I understand the fear and it's real and I struggled. And I'm just telling you to be honest about that fear and to move through it, to move past it, to get your kids the help that they need. In many homeschool communities, I also see that the basic truth that kids learn at their own speed is distorted many times to extreme. Of course, kids learn at their own speed. And, that's an important truth to know, but it can also be a dangerous normalization of clear signs that there is a real issue. It is true. There's a range for most skills, but it's also true that the earlier an issue can be identified, the better the chances are that it can be remediated. I see parents of 9 or 10-year-olds worried about their child's reading, and then a lot of people are just saying, oh, don't worry about it. They'll get it eventually. They're just a late bloomer. Yes, that's true, but also there could be an issue that can be tackled early on. We tell a lot of homeschoolers tell each other that don't worry, they'll get it. They're on their own timeline and they'll get it eventually, but it's not always true. So there are times where we do need to intervene with some different helps that we're not giving them. So some parents know that there's an issue, but they're afraid to seek out the diagnosis. Homeschooling tends to breed an unhealthy fear of authority figures. So yeah, there are school officials who overstep, and there are people who disapprove of homeschooling, but in general, homeschooling has gone pretty mainstream. But there seems to be a fear amongst homeschooling families that if they bring their child to someone who might be able to identify a special need, it will open up a can of worms that leads directly to social services showing up at their door. I see parents who decide that their child is struggling. They wait until the child catches up on reading or writing or behavior before seeking out help. And then really, the result can be that their child falls further and further behind, and the parent becomes even more reticent to bring their child to get help. For what it's worth, I've never heard of any family in my area being accused of educational neglect or of anyone ever having a social worker show up at their door. Yet that fear is so large among so many families. So, what can be done? Well, first of all, we need to accept the idea that there's nothing wrong with a child who isn't neurotypical. We need to normalize neurological differences while seeking help. So we want to normalize them, but we also want to seek help to navigate these neurological differences. There is help in both the private and public sector. So you can go to a private learning center like Successful Learning here in the Vancouver, Washington area, or you can go to the public school. It's up to you. There's lots of helps out there. A diagnosis doesn't necessarily label your child. I know that's another fear among some people that, a diagnosis, I don't want it to label them. Well, yes, it can. But it also can give clarity so that you can get the help that you need. Ask questions, get help. So here are a few specific learning disabilities to watch out for. First of all, I'd like to talk about speech development issues. Students can have a wide range of verbal distortions. So watch for delayed speech, limited words, difficulty with syllables, verbal inconsistencies, distorted sounds. Sometimes you hear a lisp. watch out for these. There's help for it. And the sooner you get help for these speech issues, the easier it will be to overcome them, because they just become so used to speaking in this way that it will become more and more difficult to overcome. The second type of learning disability I'd like to talk about is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, ADD. So this is a child who is unable to sit still, wait their turn, follow directions, or focus on the task at hand. So there are three main categories for this one: inattentive, hyperactive, and impulsive. So there's lots of helps out there for this. Sometimes there are medicines that are needed. If it's needed, it's needed. Don't push it away if it's needed. But there are also solutions that don't have to do with medicine. But just be open to all of the different ways to help your child. The third one I'd like to address is autism. Now, this is a neurological disorder, and it is a spectrum disorder, means that your child may have different challenges and unique personality traits. They can be high functioning, where they need minimal support, but there can be severe autism where your child might be nonverbal, or their social communication and repetitive behaviors may impair their everyday life. So it is definitely a spectrum with lots of different scenarios within the umbrella of autism. The fourth one is Dyscalculia. So this is a math disorder. It's sometimes called math dyslexia. It shows in the form of a lack of number sense, difficulty learning basic math facts, understanding money, or telling time. Students might also struggle with sequencing numbers and working out word problems. All right, the next one I'd like to talk about is dyslexia. Dyslexia is a disorder that affects reading, decoding letters, and sounds are often more difficult for someone with this diagnosis. You might have noticed a child with this reading challenge far beyond others their age. They have a difficulty in processing information, or they have difficulty with recognizing letters and matching them to the right sound. The next one is dysgraphia. This is a writing-based learning disability which affects fine motor skills. Children struggle to form letters properly. They mix their lowercase and uppercase letters randomly. They struggle with grammar and staying in the lines on writing paper. The next one is obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Now, this one is often, I think, in a sense, made fun of, or maybe made fun of isn't the right word, but people will say, oh, I'm so OCD, I have to have everything just so. Well, true OCD is very intense. So, and a child might not necessarily have a compulsion for cleanliness. There's so much more to this, but it can show up as repeating routines, an obsessive need for reassurance, or an overwhelming fear of sickness, death, or even losing their things. Another one to look out for is sensory processing disorder. So a child with SPD, or sensory processing disorder, may have overstimulated sensory responses or understimulated. So these children can either struggle with they struggle with textures of clothing, food, or they have no response to them at all. So it can be either extreme. They tend to not be aware of their own bodies and the space around them, and they have a real difficulty with transitions. So those are just a few main learning disabilities to keep your eye out for. Now, the internet is a wealth of information and can be helpful, but just remember when you're looking these things up on the interwebs that it is general information. We are all unique. We are all individuals. So these things might show up in a different way, but you can get some really good basic information online. But I highly recommend that you talk to your community, talk to some other homeschool moms and ask questions about the struggles that their children have. And then just get the help you need, either in the private or public sector. Figure it out. Find a way to get them the help they need. Through your own love and hard work and the help of your child's pediatrician, neurologist, occupational therapist, and speech therapist, there are so many things that can be done to help your child not only succeed, but thrive. And it doesn't always mean medication. It can be therapies, assistive devices, accommodations that can all make a world of difference in you and your child's life. But it all starts with your desire to fully understand your child. Don't put off getting the help you and your child need. Just as my parents sought help for me and helped me to overcome my challenges and to move on to my life's work, you can do the same. All right, homeschool moms, let's show some love. If you've been nodding along and thinking, yes, someone gets it, please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this episode. It's like a virtual high five for other homeschool moms. Let's make the Intentional Homeschooler podcast the go-to resource for encouragement, practical tips, and actionable steps in your homeschooling journey. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as right here where a brand new episode will drop every other Thursday. Until next time, you've got this, Mom.